Hello Divas, welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about literally whatever I want to, but mostly books. Today I am so excited to just get into it. I know that I haven't posted in a minute. The semester has been fucking crazy. It's just that time of the year where everything is awful. So I haven't had a ton of time for filming and editing, but I'm so excited to talk to you guys again, especially because I'm so excited for this video concept. Today, I am taking a blast to the past and revisiting Gabbie Hanna's two poetry collections. If you don't know who Gabbie Hanna is, I don't even know where to begin, honestly. She's a Viner turned YouTuber, turned musician, turned poet, turned meme. She's just a very strong and controversial internet personality. I feel like that's the best way I can describe her. But despite all that, I was a fan. I was like the #1 Gabbie Hanna stan, period. I feel like I was just a really big fan of everything that she did. I streamed her music, I bought her books, like, it was serious. I was defending her for so long. I would be in the trenches when I would listen to her music because I would always get made fun of for it, but I was like, whatever, I enjoy it. And even though I definitely don't agree with many of the actions that Gabbie Hanna did, and I would no longer consider myself a fan of her particularly, I feel like there are still things about her music and about her poetry and about her videos that I still connect with and resonate with. So going into these books, I'm very aware that, like, there is low-hanging fruit, and I probably will be picking that fruit, honestly. But I also want to give these, like, a fair shot, a fair review. It's very easy to pick and choose the bad poems in here and make this book seem worse than it is. Don't get me wrong, it is bad. So Gabbie Hanna has two poetry collections. Her first one is Adultolescence, which was published in 2017. And then the second one is Dandelion, which was published in 2020. And you will not believe this, but I have not one copy of Dandelion, not 2 copies of Dandelion, but 3 copies of Dandelion. I'm telling you, I was a fan. I was on it. And one of these copies is literally signed. I was fucking on this shit. So the reason that I have 3 copies is because they're all slightly different. They're all the same base collection, but they have different epilogues. One of them has a personal essay collection, another one has like a letters to strangers collection, and then the other one has like doodles and like unreleased lyrics and stuff like that. So I'm gonna read all of the epilogues as well because I think that I've read the base book of this, but I don't think I've completed the epilogues. So I'm actually really curious about that. I also think that some important context is that she has said that Adultolescence was rushed and that she's not particularly proud of the book that came out of it because there was a lot of filler because she had to meet a deadline. Which, does that excuse a lot of the poems being underdeveloped and filler? Absolutely not. Does it explain it? Absolutely. So I mean, without further ado, let's just get into it. I finished Adultolescence the other day. So the very first quote on the book is, "For all the kids who grew up too fast, all the adults who refuse to grow up, and everyone who's both." Firstly, I just want to let that sit in the space for a second. But secondly, I wanted to point that out because that's kind of the key concept in this collection. Nursery rhyme style poems or like comedic style poems talking about dark things. So once again, a lot of the poems are supposed to kind of sound rhymey and underdeveloped, but like I also don't feel like that excuses them from sounding underdeveloped. I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even gotten to the acknowledgements yet because you will not believe who she thanks in the acknowledgements of this book. At the beginning, by the way. As much as I'd love to take all the credit for this book, there are a lot of people who had a hand in making this dream come to life. To Shane Dawson, thank you for putting me... Thank you for pushing me to stop putting this off and just start writing. You inspire and encourage me in so many ways. I also feel like the author's note is very important. The author's note reads, "This book was inspired by Bo Burnham, who was inspired by Shel Silverstein. So I suppose by transitive property, this book is inspired by Shel Silverstein," which I'm cool with because he's dope. So like a lot of the poems in here are not trying to be serious, but also if you're selling a poetry collection, like, you know what I mean. The first poem in this collection I think is good, not in the sense of that the quality is good, but in the sense that it sets up the tone of the book really well. It's called Unexpected, and it reads, "Ladies and gentlemen, come have a look. Here at last, another YouTuber book. Just what we needed, someone to produce the tangible ego of a 20-something douche." It has that like self-deprecating energy and that comedic rhyme. So it sets up kind of like the style and the tone of the book, but unfortunately it also sets up the quality. A lot of the poems just are underdeveloped or a singular thought and they don't really go anywhere, which is a little bit frustrating because I do think that there are a lot of really good ideas in here, but I'll get to that. So because I want to give you like a really fair review, I'm going to talk about a lot of the issues that I had with the book as well as a lot of things that I enjoyed about the book and then show poems to back both of those up. Firstly, like I said, there are a lot of filler poems in here and some of them are literally just tweets. I remember seeing her tweeting out those things and reading them and then going into this book and being like, why did she put that in here? One of those examples is, "I donated blood today. Feels good to finally be somebody's type." And that's the entire poem. Another one is called Relative, and it reads, "Time is relative, beauty is relative, family is relatives." We have Philosophy, which reads, "If you eat an entire pizza by yourself in the woods and no one's around to see it, do the calories count?" Ahead of her time talking about Schrodinger's calories. Concealer reads, "I wear makeup because I have acne. I have acne because I wear makeup." Once again, I literally remember seeing that tweet. Therapy reads, "How do I feel? The entire car ride here, I kept envisioning a gruesome head-on collision with a fucking semi, and I unbuckled my seatbelt just in case. That's how I feel." We have Certain, which reads, "I think, I guess, I know that you probably, definitely, maybe for sure are potentially the one for me," which did get a chuckle out of me, but that doesn't stop it from like sounding like a tweet. And then we have this one of these divas saying, "You've changed," and this guy saying, "Thank God I was the fucking worst," which once again, I remember Gabbie Hanna tweeting that joke and then seeing it in here and being like, girl. I do want to say that the drawings in this book are pretty good. They are very simplistic, which I don't love. This is also a pretty good example, and then when you turn the page, it looks like that. And I feel like sometimes the drawings do elevate the poem. For example, this poem is called Happy, and it says, "Every time I try to write a silly poem, it turns out incredibly sad," which is just a filler poem, but the drawing I feel like matches the energy and kind of elevates it in a way. Elevates. So I think that they're decent in here, but if I remember correctly, they get a lot better in Dandelion. There are some unfortunate examples of notes app poetry in here, like, "Everyone tells me I deserve better. I know I deserve better, but I don't want better. I want you." There's also just poems that literally have no purpose in here. This poem is called Inspired, and it says, "The next poem you're about to read is because it suddenly came to me. I hopped out of the shower soaking wet to write it down before I could forget. So I really hope you like it because I just lost my security deposit when I drenched my brand new carpet. So you could read it and think, fam, this is lit. Hope the next page was worth the compromise of shampoo running into my eyes." I don't know why we needed that. Like, have you ever read a poetry collection that, like, the poem before was like, "This is how I wrote the poem"? I feel like it makes this come off a lot more pretentious than I think it actually is. And then it sucks because the poem after that also is not that good. It starts off with no rhyme scheme at all, and then it just randomly starts up. It starts, "He asked, 'Can I kiss you?' She replied, 'I don't know you that well.' He asked her favorite color. Come on, she said, you can do better. I feel like that's a decent start to a poem. It's only 5 lines, but you already have an image of what's kind of happening. There's no rhyme scheme, so it's a little bit more freeform, which I feel like is more fun to play with in poetry. But then she just randomly starts a rhyme scheme, and I feel like it really limits her as a poet because she's not really great at it. There's just a lot of like 3 and 4 letter words. For example, so he took it to heart and better he did. He learned about what she was like as a kid. He listened to her friends, oh, the stories they'd tell. He talked to her demons and learned them as well. And then the story continues and it's all show and no tell. So by the end of the poem, when like the emotional moment hits, it really doesn't have a lot of impact. There are some poems in here that I think are decent, but they are just very amateur for a published collection. For example, this poem is called Depression and it reads, when life is great and nothing's wrong, I'll stay in your mind like a catchy song. When you come up for air and you're feeling free, I'll weigh you down like lead boots in the sea. If you try to wash me down the drain, thicker than mud, I'll stick to your brain. When you're filled with joy without concern, I'll hollow you out like a jack-o'-lantern. Concern and lantern. Does that fucking rhyme? When nothing you need to do is completed, you'll get up to go, but I'll keep you seated. When you start to build hope and the future's bright, I'll snuff out the sun and prolong the night. No matter personal or financial success, I'll crawl up your skin with the reaper's caress. When you're close to escaping but missed by a thread, I'll be here waiting with a gun to your head. So it's just like amateur. It's fine, it's whatever, but it's something that I would write in high school, you know? I think one of the most frustrating things about this book is that a lot of the poems have strong and solid concepts, but they don't go anywhere. And honestly, to me, that feels more frustrating than just the filler poems, because I feel like it shows that there are ideas and there is creativity, but it's just not being pushed to the full extent that it needs to be. She even directly addresses this in the poem Iron, where she says, when I was young, my mom used to check if the iron was hot by touching it, and I don't know, I just feel like there's a metaphor in there somewhere. So she brings up this interesting concept and then says this is a metaphor and then doesn't explore it. There's a poem in here called Belt about bullies that made fun of her belt at school, and then the next day she went and one of the bullies was wearing that same belt. It's a pretty decent poem, but then it ends. I never said anything about it, but it perplexed me that she would be so quick to chime in to make fun of that belt. Bullies are the most insecure people on the planet. And like, what a fucking lame way to end that. There's another poem in here called Lost where she's using a metaphor of losing this person as a partner to trying to find him in the lost and found. But the last stanza is, so yes, I guess I lost you, but I'll just keep on trying to remember where I left you so I can quit this crying, which is a horrible last line. We have a poem called Live, which reads, things won't get better if you're gone. You can't feel relief if you're a carcass. If it's the shadows that you're running from, remember that dead eyes only see darkness. Which is like a okay Courtney Pepperneal poem. There's something there, it's just a bit too basic and doesn't go explored. There's a poem called 2020 that you can tell I loved so much that the book spine is like broken to this moment. It's crazy. And going back to it again, it just reads very nursery rhymey. He told me not to trust him. I had no reason not to. He filled me up right to the brim and my feelings quickly grew. He said he'd never hurt me, and to this day he had not. He said he'd never hurt me, but it seemed he soon forgot. I turned the other cheek when he would talk to other girls. They were a vacation, but to him I was the world. He promised he'd protect me, then he struck me limb to limb. Guess I never knew he meant I needed protection from him. He pleaded for forgiveness as I fell down to the ground. He said he had a sickness and he needed me around. Again he had to grovel when my face hit the cement. I crumbled like the gravel when he offered his lament. He said I was his future, and so I took his word. He said I was his future, then the rest was all a blur. They told me to leave sooner. I could never do that, never. Blood and bruises disappear, but true love is forever. He said he'd never leave me. On his mother's grave he swore, so I guess it kind of shook me when he walked right out the door. They told me to get away. There was no reason I could find. I guess I learned the hard way. Lesson being, love is blind. And then in parentheses, ing pain. Which again, like, the rest of the poem is decent, but it's just a really horrible ending and it completely throws off the rhythm, which I know that's the reason that she put in the parentheses, but like, still, I feel like it just would have been more impactful if she ended it with "Love is blind," especially because the poem is literally called 2020. Hindsight is 2020. We can make the connection. We have this poem called Recycle, which again, I think is pretty good. There's this line that reads, "This game was always how can I manipulate this lust to make it seem like something real." And I feel like that's a pretty good line that I related to. But then it ends with, "As much as I would never like to see you again, please don't make this poem our last goodbye." And I just hate self-referential writing, and like, again, I think that it's just a very weak way to end the poem. I feel like it almost shows that like Gabbie does have the mind of an artist, but she doesn't particularly have the skill of an artist, at least not in this book. She has a poem called Run, which I think is pretty good. She's talking about how she joined the track team and then people made fun of her shoes being from Payless, and so she stopped doing the track team because she didn't want to be made fun of. She said, "That's one of my most painful memories because I let it affect my decision and deter me from doing something I wanted to do. From that day on, I swore to myself I would never allow others' negativity to prevent me from being happy. From that day on, I promised myself I would never run." Which again, I feel like it's just really on the nose, and to a certain extent, I want to excuse it because, like, at the end of the day, her audience was younger people. So I was like 13 in 2017. Am I doing that math right? So I don't know if like my 13 or 14-year-old self would be like, oh, some of these or all of these poems are really on the nose, but like me right now revisiting this collection, these are absolutely on the nose. Another decent beginning but horrible ending is this poem called Haunted, where she's talking about this ghost that lives in her apartment. And then she's like, oh, I think I'll just let him stay because I think we all understand what it's like to be haunted by loneliness. There's another poem called Teacher, where she is describing this experience where she was with a guy and she basically had to teach him how to be in a relationship and how to be a good partner. And then they ended up breaking up and he went to another girl with all of the lessons already taught. The end reads, "The next guy will have already learned from the teacher before me. Maybe he'll have his degree in decency. Maybe he'll have graduated from boy to man. And probably some other girl will have taught him how." I feel like that's a decent end to the poem, but then the last line is, "Teachers truly have the toughest job." Which, like, true, but also, like, I don't think that's a good end to the poem. My next complaint about this book is I feel like a lot of the poems read more as song lyrics, and I feel like a lot of them have turned into song lyrics. We have New, which reads, "Heartbroken women cut their hair in hopes that removing dead ends will somehow make them feel alive again," which did fully end up becoming a song that Gabbie Hanna released. This is another example that I think is good, but it just reads more song lyrics. It's called LA, and it reads, "You're gonna miss me every time it rains, in this town that floods from lack of drains. The storms here are light and very rare, so the city streets are unprepared. But you and me, we like the water, and the eerie chill that comes thereafter. So when I'm gone and you're stuck in traffic, and all the drivers start to panic, 'cause they're paralyzed by soggy weather, you'll feel my absence more than ever. With every drip of every drop, you'll think of me and your heart will stop. Even if only thrice a year, you'll hear me purring in your ear. Like the momentary strike of lightning, you'll close your eyes and see me dancing. I'll be the ghost you don't believe in. I'll drench your minds in ways not even your windshield wipers can sweep clean. Every time it rains, you'll remember me." Reading it out loud, that structure is crazy. I don't know how I feel about that. But again, it reads more as song lyrics to me than a poem. I like it. I think it's decent. And then my last example of this is called Ghost. It reads, "Listening for answers that would never be heard, I realized that silence speaks louder than words. Seeking explanation, I felt blind and deaf. I don't care that you're gone, I just hate how you left." And this one also has like a pretty cool drawing on it. So again, I like it, but I just think it reads more of a song lyric. I do have positive things to say about this book, I promise. I'm just getting my negative things out of the way. There are some rhyme schemes in here that are just absolutely horrible. I've already touched on some of them, but there's this poem called Gift that reads, "I know it hurts your feelings when I returned what you called presents. I wish that I could keep them, but they reminded me of your presence. Rhyming presence with presence, groundbreaking. And then we have the titular poem, Adultolescence, which reads, have you ever met a kid who wasn't a kid, who did all the things mommies and daddies did, who didn't have friends or play games much, but cooked and cleaned and cared for babies and such? Give that kid a hug. There's the drawing. Again, it is cute, but again, the rhyme scheme is just really basic. Okay, let me take a break from tearing her apart and read you some poems that I think actually have a strong concept to them. These are poems that I think are good or creative or really nail the comedy that she's trying to pull off in this book. There's a poem called Quotes, which isn't really a poem, it is more of a joke, but I thought it was kind of funny. It reads, I'm not gonna lie, someone who's about to lie. I hate drama, a very dramatic person. I don't care what other people think. An insecure individual. I'm not like other girls, a particular predictable girl. I would like a snack. Me. Is it millennial? Yes. Is it stupid? Yes. Did I laugh? Yes. This is actually maybe my favorite poem in the collection. You can see the drawing. It's like two stick figures both thinking the same thing. The poem is called Speak, and it reads, I want to tell you that I want you to tell me to tell you what I want to tell you, but I'm afraid because I'm thinking about you, thinking about what I'm thinking, and I'm guessing that you're guessing that I'm guessing what you're guessing, and I wish I could say that I just wish you'd say that I should just say what I want to say. I feel like this is a really solid example of the creativity in this book. I know that Gabbie has talked about struggling with OCD, and I feel like this poem really represents that in a very captivating way. For example, the other poem in this book about OCD, called OCD, reads, I'm not the best at organizing thoughts, but no one's better at organizing pots. I'm ineffective at handling stress, but I'm an expert at handling mess. Life is kind of tough to handle, but it's a breeze to dust a mantle. The fear of losing control is mighty, but at least your closet's neat and tidy. Which I feel like is an insanely boring look into OCD, when this is an insanely creative way to look into it. It's also a lot of fun because you can cover up one page and just read the other page, and it still makes sense. This is another example of a drawing being really good and corresponding to a poem really well. This reads, next time you pour everything you have into someone, make sure they don't have any leaks. And I think that that drawing on top of it is really fun and creative. Like the stick figure ones, I just love when she incorporates her poetry into her drawings. I think that's when she really shines with her creativity. This poem, Light Bulbs, isn't the best. The poem reads, I stopped loving my lover, that light burnt out. I stopped calling my mother, I smashed that bulb to bits. I'm wary of my friends, now there's glass strewn about. I stopped loving myself, and now I'm left in darkness. So, like, I don't think it's a great poem, but I love that it's intertwined with this drawing and in that font. This is another poem that is meant to be a comedy poem, and I think is actually really successful. It's called Perfect, and it reads, you're the funniest person I know, besides Bob from work. That guy's a riot. You're the kindest person I know. Well, after my sister. She makes me pancakes when I stay over. You're the best listener I know. Beside my cat, she never cuts me off. You're the most trustworthy person I know. Besides Father Kevin, but that goes without saying. You're the best looking person I know. In person, that is. Have you seen some of these Instagram models? You're the most talented person I know. If I'm not counting myself. I mean, have you read this book? You're okay, I guess. I think we should see other people. And I think that that's funny. That got me. I giggled. Alright, unfortunately, I need to get back to the bad stuff because there are some insane millennial moments in this book. I wrote these notes as millennial / Taylor Swift coded. In the poem Chivalry, there's a stanza that reads, I'm a holographic Charizard, highly desired and rare. Yo, I even drop Pokemon references, cause I'm fucking dope as shit. Let's just let that sit in the space. Another one called Walls reads, my neighbors have really loud sex, a lot of it. I'm happy for them, I just wish she'd fake her orgasms a little more quietly. I almost complained once, but then I realized if I can hear them having animalistic, passionate intercourse, they can hear me watching 13 consecutive hours of Friends. Let bygones be bygones, I guess. Like, oh my gosh, she's watching 13 consecutive hours of Friends. How chic, how cool. This one reads, I saw a woman at a restaurant choke on her meal and collapse. I'll have what she's having. Like, fucking whatever, you know what I mean? And then there's a poem called Troll that is very Taylor Swift core to me. It reads, if you're someone who hates without a cause, someone who can't get their filthy paws off their keyboard long enough to count to 2, I don't hate you, I feel bad for you. Your Venmo'd words can't break my callus, I know there's pain behind your malice. 'Cause the thing you hate in everyone else is probably the thing you hate most in yourself. Ooh, that one is so good. I loved it. I also want to point out the poem Fluent because it reads, as of late, since this book deal, I speak in strictly poetry. My sentences are metered and heroic couplets flow freely. Every minuscule moment is a latent, free-form verse. My hyperbole or imagery, I'm not sure which is worse. Every brute or object is a potential metaphor. My art form is heartache prepared with delusions of grandeur. Silly smiles slip off my tongue to an insufferable degree. Each time I take to talk is an ostentatious soliloquy. Dousing my friends in laden presentation is something I do fear. I wish that I could take a break, but my deadline's growing near. And I feel like that poem is so funny considering that this is the book that came out of it. Alright, now I just want to read you some banger lines. These are going to be extremely out of context, but I think they're funnier that way. Believe it or not, it's possible to have big tits and also big dreams. It's possible to have a great ass and also a great work ethic. Like, yes, she's a revolutionary for that, for real, for real. And then there's a poem called Immortality that starts off with, what if one day they make kids read this shit in English class? Maybe, Gabbie. I mean, you know, who knows? Maybe they will teach this. And then I want to read you the very last poem that ends this collection. It's called Finn, and it reads, did you read this book cover to cover, or did you skip around a bit? Did you share it with a friend or lover? You better not have. Make that bitch buy their own copy. I want a Lamborghini. So, I mean, in a way, I think that the opening and the closing poem is very representative of what this book is, which I think is good. I feel like at the very least, it shows that there's a comprehensive vision to this. Does that vision always end up successfully? No. Now, before I get into my general thoughts about this, I was curious, and while I was reading this, I would mark if a poem stood out to me as being good, as being unfinished, or as being complete filler. And I tallied them because I wanted to see the difference in Adultolescence and Dandelion. And I didn't do it with every single poem. Like I said, I just did it with the ones that like stood out to me in that regard. And at the end of the day, I had 22 poems in here that I marked as good, 22 poems in here that I marked as unfinished, and a whopping 48 poems in here that were filler. So I'm going to read you some highlights from all of those categories to give you another kind of more fair representation of what this book is. First is the filler category, in which there's a poem called Fair, which reads, life isn't fair, but it's unfair to everyone, so that's fair, I guess. We have a poem called Deviated, which reads, these nights are awfully boring without your awful snoring. We have a poem called Sad, and the entire poem is Isfied. Sad is fide. We have a poem called K, which reads, K. There's Hypocrite, which reads, ever notice that the word synonym doesn't have a synonym, which I feel like is wrong. We have Advice 15, which there are a lot of advice poems in here, and they're all really bad, but this one is especially filler. It reads, never let someone else be the reason you wake up in the morning. We have Sup that reads, you really hurt my feelings, but you're the person I talk to when my feelings are hurt, so this is kind of awkward. Anyway, what's up? We have Like that reads, like, I didn't think I was, like, gonna like it the way that I like it, but, like, I like it. Oh my god, we have Advice 17, which reads, it's pretty shocking that racism still exists. It's literally a matter of black and white. Like, say you like kittens, you're gonna like kittens whether it's a black kitten or a white kitten. The color of the kitten doesn't change the fact that it's a kitten. So can we all just chill with judging by color, because fur is just fur and kittens are great. Oh, and if you're a dog person, feel free to replace the word kitten with puppy. I mean, voice of a generation for real. She really just ended racism with that. I'm so proud of her. We have Wish that reads, if I had one wish, it would be to never have a typo in a poem again. All right. We have a double fucking whammy, 2 poems on the same page. Desperate that reads, I like my men like I like my pizza. I'm not very picky. And Advice 13, which reads, people change. I used to hate coconut and now I love coconut. So don't judge people on their past. Second chances are real. Have faith. Don't give up on people. The most annoying thing about these advice sections as well is that they are all one sentence no matter what. And it's also written in like internet language. So instead of people, it writes PPL. And when she writes second chances are real, she writes 2 ND chances, the letter R, real. We have Raw, which reads, our love is like that chicken in the back of the fridge. I know it's expired. I'm just not ready to throw it away. We have IDK, which reads, I don't know, you know? And then we have the ultimate filler poem called Filler, which reads, some of these poems were written because inspiration struck. Others were written because I had a deadline and needed to fill pages. Can you guess which are which? So just literally admitting that, like, there's a bunch of filler in this. Keep in mind, that's on page 234. The book ends on page 248. You have to make it through the entire book, and then she's like, oh yeah, by the way, so many of these are filler. All right, now we're getting to the unfinished section. Again, these are just poems that I think have ideas behind them, but they're just not finished. We have Cheater, which reads, I accidentally used your toothbrush today, but I didn't mind, because it's the closest I can get to your kiss. Then I remembered where your mouth has been, and I got really fucking pissed. I like that first stanza, but it just does not land the ending for me. We have Resolution, which reads, I wanted to quit all my bad habits, but one of my bad habits was quitting things. But things isn't finished on the typewriter. Can you see my annotation that just says what? Because, like, I get it. It's funny, kind of, but, like, is there not a more creative way to explore that? We have Fate, which reads, if opposites attract, my soulmate is going to be funny, easygoing, charming, attractive, exciting, adventurous, affectionate, amiable, courageous, intelligent, rational, affable, brave, humble, neat, well-tempered, patient, polite, confident, sensible, emotionally stable, and just an all-around gem. Lucky me. Again, I just feel like there's something there, and the poem itself isn't horrid. It's just not finished. I just don't think it's explored enough. This is another one that is just like, whatever. It's okay, but it's not up to the quality that I would expect in a poetry collection. It's called Abuse, and it reads, I'm so sorry you were in the blast radius when some delicate flower had his ego shattered. Which is fine. It's a good sentiment. I think, again, it's like a good Courtney Pepperneal poem, but it's just not really doing anything for me, you know? All right, now I have my good examples. Some of these aren't particularly, like, great or fantastic, but I think that they're finished. I think that they get the job done, and I think that they are solid, especially when it is in the context of the vision of this book. We have Dolly, which reads, I'll be your little rag doll when you're feeling kind of bored, even if it means when you're not, I'll be ignored. I'll ask to be a real girl, though you treat me like I'm fake, and toss me like a ball without concern that I might break. If you'd rather play with trucks or build things with your blocks, just shut the lid and turn the key to lock me in your toy box. I'll still be here waiting when you say you want to play, and every day I'll sit and pray you don't throw me away. Till that comes, I'll wait for you to choose me as your plaything, 'cause every single time you want to use me is amazing. I'll admit that when you put me back, my spirit falls. I don't know whoever said that boys don't play with dolls. I think that's decent. I think it tells a story. I think it has a decent rhyme scheme. I think it has a really good rhythm until those last 2 lines. I think it's good. If there was more of that in here, I would be happier with the collection. We have Snap, which reads, this thing we're doing, it's merely a photocopy of what we had, just some flat thought of a beautiful moment past. But I'll take it for now. I'll pin it above my headboard and look at it before I go to sleep, every single night for however long it takes, until it blends in with the walls and I forget it's there. Then, one day, maybe it'll catch my eye again, and I'll look at it with fondness and affection. Maybe I'll feel a whisper of the warmth you brought, or maybe I'll feel a hint of exhaustion. But memories will always be just that, so I'll toss it in the pile with the rest, or add it to my photo album that I keep in the attic. The past is for visiting, not living. I think that it's a really good poem, and me personally, I love the concept of the connection between memories and pictures. I always find poems that explore that to be really interesting. So I find this to be also really interesting. I think that it's executed well. The only thing that I wish is I do wish that it was a little bit more romantic. I feel like we're reading a lot of poems about heartbreak and about somebody who screwed you over and about yearning and longing, and that's good, and I don't mind that because, like, you know, if you want to write about heartbreak, write about heartbreak. But I also think that if she were to write something a little bit more romantic, it would create more diversity in the book. It can get a little tedious reading the same concept over and over, but again, I think that this poem is pretty good. These are both two poems that I don't particularly think are like strong poems, but once again, I think that they are funny and they achieve what Gabbie Hanna wants to do in this book. The first one is called Clean, and it reads, I've got a head full of nightmares, a heart full of rage, a belly full of liquor, and a sink full of dishes. I'll start with the dishes. The drawing is kind of fun for that one, and there's a mug that she drew in like a previous poem, and I love that there's just that connection there, that little like Easter egg. And then the next poem over, Breakfast, reads, Did you ever wake up in the morning and really want a bowl of cereal, but you were out of milk? So instead of milk, you used orange juice, and instead of cereal, you used vodka. Again, not like a good poem, but it did get a chuckle out of me. And like, again, the vision for this was supposed to be like a comedic sort of poetry collection. We have a poem called Grow that I honestly don't want to read the entire thing. It's really good. It's about people saying you've changed as an insult, and how Gabbie is talking about how change is good and growth is good and how she feels much better than she did like years ago, right? She ends it with, Before I changed, I was sad and insecure and defeated. Before I changed, I felt small and alone and fearful. Before I grew up, I acted in a way that was brash and defensive and combative. Yes, I've changed. Thank you for noticing. Again, it's a decent poem, but there's like a lot of references to that you've changed. I literally mentioned one of them. So I wish that she just like cut those other ones and kept this one because this is the good one. And then this is another poem that like maybe it's a little bit basic, but I still think that it does what it wants to do successfully. I think it's pretty good. It's called Chase, and it reads, Sometimes the person you want will make you chase them. So chase, 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 run, run, run. Burn lots of calories. While you're at it, do some squats. Throw in some strength training. Sweat, sweat, sweat. Clean up your diet. Don't forget to stretch. Chase, chase, chase. Pretty soon, you'll catch them. And then run, run, run away. You have better ways to spend your time than someone who made you chase, chase, chase. Plus, now you're smoking hot and out of that douchebag's league. Go you. I feel like that's just kind of fun. I liked that poem. I liked reading it. I felt like, again, it does what it wants to do successfully. So my general thoughts on this book is that it is pretty rough. That's not to say that it doesn't have its highlights. It's just that you have to get through so much filler to get to those highlights. This collection is 250 pages. It is very, very long, and I feel like I understand that for a comedic poetry collection, but I honestly think that it could have been capped like around the 180 mark, and that would have cut out a bunch of filler in here. Again, I had 48 filler poems in here, and I didn't even mark all of the filler poems. If you were to cut those, that would immediately bring it down to 200, which I feel like is a better number. And I feel like even the poems in here that are good do tend to be underdeveloped or cliche or a little bit basic. There's not a lot of experimentation with the form of poetry itself. It does tend to be pretty standard. There are poems in here, like the poem with the thought bubble, that I think do have fun with language, but it's just so few and far between. She also has a terminal case of not knowing how to end a poem. My God, was that my biggest issue in this book. I hated the way that she ended a majority of her poems. Like I said, she doesn't allow herself to explore this concept. She needs to tie everything in with a joke, which I understand that this is a comedic poetry collection, but you have comedy poems in here. Let your serious poems be serious. The internet slang in here makes sense because she's a YouTuber. I do think that it automatically dates this book. And I do understand why YouTubers specifically use internet language in their books, but I just feel like whenever you're reading a book, you want to be reading a book and you want there to be the correct spelling and grammar. And I don't think that that is a crazy thing to ask from a published author and a publisher. This was published by Simon & Schuster, which kind of brings me to my next point of like, you would do it too for a check. Not to like get into the discourse about celebrity book deals or anything like that, but like if I was given the opportunity from Simon & Schuster to publish my poetry and like make a bunch of money off of it, oh, I would 100% do it. Absolutely. Does that excuse the book from being bad? Absolutely not. But still, I mean, like, it's a YouTuber poetry collection. You're not buying fucking Mary Oliver. But I also feel like even in the context of a YouTuber book, this is rough. I think it's very on brand for Gabbie, but I don't think that it shows her creativity in ways that I know other projects of hers have, if that makes sense. So like I said, I am going to read Dandelion, and then I'm going to read all of the epilogues, and I will get back to you once I have finished those. I'm not even ready to film quite yet, but literally, look what I found outside. A fucking dandelion. I don't really have any comment about that. I just think that it's kind of funny. Anyways, I'm back, and hopefully with better lighting. And I have finished all 3 versions of Dandelion, and I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that Dandelion is better than Adultolescence. Bad news, not by much. Before I get into the book, I want to mention that I think I was a little bit nice in my review for Adultolescence. And I do think that I am going to end up being meaner about Dandelion for a couple of reasons. Firstly is because I don't think that Adultolescence is as bad as it's been made out to be on the internet. Is it bad? Yes, but it's like 2-star bad. It's not like 1-star bad, you know? Which obviously is a very small difference, but I really wanted to give it a fair shot and give it a fair review, and I do think I was overcompensating a little bit with that. Since Dandelion doesn't have as bad of a reputation as Adultolescence, I don't think as many people have talked about this. I feel the space where I can be a little bit meaner towards it, especially because Adultolescence was a debut and there were a lot of issues that I had with it, but I was willing to forgive them because it was a debut. And yet those issues come back in this collection, which is very frustrating. It's more frustrating to read a sophomore poetry book with the same issues that you had in the debuts rather than just reading the debuts. But still, I think that this is better than Adultolescence by like a 0.25 star difference, but still a little bit better. So I'm gonna get into it. Same thing as always, I'm gonna talk about the positives, the negatives, and I'm gonna read you a lot of poems so that you kind of get a good idea about what this collection is. Starting out with the dedication and the acknowledgements, I feel like these are much improved from Adultolescence. The dedication is actually a dedication to her grandma. It reads, "This book is dedicated to my grandma Patty, who saved the newspaper clipping from my very first published poem and gave it to me over a decade later. Thank you for nourishing my love for writing." And then she included a poem that she wrote in autumn 2004, which I think is very cute. And then the acknowledgements are also actually acknowledgements. She's not thanking Shane Dawson in here. The first poem reads Bloom, and it reads, "I was 26 years old when I saw my first flower, and instead of rejoicing in its beauty, I mourned for all the years I was blind." There's a cute dandelion drawing in here, and something that I love about this book is that the drawings are very interesting and creative. There's a lot more choices made in here. For example, the dandelions flow on to the next page, and these dandelion seeds continue to show up throughout the book. I think that the drawings is really where this book has leveled up. They are just exponentially better than the drawings in Adultolescence. Same with this one. I don't even like the dialogue here with the guy saying life is full of ups and downs and the girl saying, oh cool, when's the up part? I feel like this is complete filler, but the drawing is a lot better. And I don't know if I showed you any of these from Adultolescence, but there were a lot of poems of two characters talking. But it would just kind of be like a boring outline. I don't want to say boring, actually. Boring in comparison to this. This is a lot more fun to me. This is a lot more interesting, even if I don't think that the poem here is any good. Jesus. Another thing that I love that she does in here is use completely black pages. I just think that it is absolutely beautiful. I love the white text. I feel like the white drawings really make it stick out. That was like one of the most exciting parts about this book to me. When I turned to a new page and there was black space, I was just like so excited to see what was next. I feel like, again, this just shows more creativity and more time and thought put into this book. I also think that the formatting of this book is really solid. It has a very good flow. A lot of the times poems are connected and they're on the same page with a corresponding drawing, or there will be like multiple poems in a row that are thematically connected. I think that the formatting in here is really good. However, I think the formatting here is being used as a way to make the book seem more impressive than it is. There would be a lot of times where I would read the two poems on the page and be like, oh, I don't really love either of these, but I love that they're connected. And then I caught myself doing that. And I was like, wait, no, that doesn't excuse the poems being bad. So I'm going to show you some examples. So there's this drawing, which I think is a lot of fun. The poem Inferno reads, why do we concern ourselves with the meaning of life and death? Don't you think that dying is treating one hell for the next? And Ironic that reads, I obsess so much over the meaning of life, I swear it's gonna kill me. Neither of those are really particularly standouts to me. While reading this book, I had to really reflect on my opinions about short poetry. Poetry that's only like 2 to 8 lines long. Because I think that they do have a place in the poetry. Oop, hello, oh my god. Because I do think they have a place in the poetry landscape. They're just not what I connect with, and they're not what I resonate with. And I feel like it can get really repetitive really quickly. So I feel like reading this collection was a bit frustrating because there were a lot of short poems and the quality of them just varied. For example, Inferno, I think it's a solid idea. I just think that 4 lines is not enough for this idea to really leave an impact on me, at least not written in this way. Like, they're connected, so it's cool. I really love this drawing, and it relates really well to the 2 poems in here. The first one reads, sometimes finding the right person just means realizing all the things you thought mattered to you don't. And the other one, called Narcissist, reads, don't be fooled when he stares deeply into your eyes. He's only looking for his own reflection. So again, these are thematically connected with a thematically relevant drawing, but that doesn't make the poems good. We have this drawing of a minnow and a shark, and the drawing of the shark continues on to the next page. And all 4 of these poems are relevant to the sea, but none of them are like good. Oh my gosh, this one is probably the most egregious example of it. This is the drawing. The first poem, which reads ungrateful, reads, you complain about sand in your house, but you live at the fucking beach. And hot reads, where there's smoke, there's fire, or possibly a vape pen. Either way, get the hell out of there. Neither of these poems mean anything, and just because it has a thematically relevant drawing doesn't make it any good. This is more so just one page, but I love the formatting in here. But it reads, I blocked your number so I could stop waiting on a message that would never come. And that's not interesting to me. That's filler. That's nothing. This is the last example that I have, and it's extra egregious because I love these drawings. This is the first drawing, and then this is the second drawing. I love those. I think that they're so cool. There's 4 poems on these 2 pages. None of them are good. Free reads, "You were my favorite hobby, such a lovely way to pass the time." Vows reads, "They broke everything in the house till they had nothing left to break but each other." Pleasantries reads, "Take care," he said, as if he ever cared about me. And Christmas reads, "I'd give you the world and you'd still remain silent. You'd give me your heart if you knew where to find it." These are 4 really bad poems connected by 2 really interesting drawings. And I hate to repeat myself, I hate to sound like a broken record, but that doesn't make the poems any good. Now, there are some poems in here that desperately made me wish that she did more prose. I hope one of the things that I'm really getting across in this video is that I don't think that Gabbie Hanna is untalented. I think that she's really talented when she's doing things that she excels at, and poetry is not a thing that she excels at, in my opinion. This poem, Mute, reads, "The last thing you ever said to me was, 'I promise this isn't goodbye,' and I never heard your voice again." I think that that line would have hit so much harder in some sort of prose or fiction, but since that's all the poem is, it really doesn't leave any impact on me. We have Forget, which reads, "All my happiest memories are with people who hurt too much to remember." I would love that sentence if it was the first line of a short story, but it's not. It's a singular poem that doesn't go anywhere else. I'm not going to read you this poem because it's really long, but you can see from structure alone, it has a more prose-like structure, which I prefer, and I like this, and it made me wish she did more prose. And then my last example of this is the poem called Coin, which reads, "I want you to know how much I resent you, but I can't tell you how much I hate you without revealing how much I loved you." Great. Pretty good line of dialogue. I feel like I just wish I had more context of the story of this line. I'm not even going to call it a poem. And that leads me into my next point about this book, which is I feel like she doesn't let us into the world of these poems. She doesn't let us into the story. She doesn't give us any context, and so we're just reading words that have no connection to anything. I'm sure that they mean something to her, but I don't know what this experience is about. You need to let me in a little bit. And when you don't let me in a little bit, you end up with shit like this, which reads, "You built an ocean in the galaxy, and we swam in the universe, the sun and moon in each of us." What does that mean? Does it sound cool? Sure, but I don't feel anything from it. I don't get anything from this. There's no purpose. This poem reads, "Friday the 13th and a harvest moon. A night built for us has gone too soon. A starless sky, I still wish for your face. A night built for us has gone to waste." Again, I don't get the story here. I get a glimpse into the story. I'm intrigued by this story. I want to know more about this story, but she's not telling us anything about this story. I adjusted the lighting. Hopefully that didn't make it worse, and if it did, I'm so sorry. Now, I do want to talk about some of the comedy poems in here, because I think that there are some funny ones, unfortunately. It is very millennial humor, and I also feel like it's very frustrating to read these in a poetry book. So I have kind of this knee-jerk reaction to be angry at the fact that I laughed at these, but I mean, these are the poems that I laughed at. This poem is called Sure. It reads, "Sometimes I think I've lost my mind, but other times I'm certain." And there's that drawing. I feel like this is a great example of a drawing elevating a poem. The poem is actually decent in terms of like a comedy poem, and then the drawing corresponds and elevates the energy of the poem. I like this. This poem is called Love. It reads, "Just 4 little letters to describe all of you, from your nose to your toes in your tattered old shoe. I know what you're thinking. That is absurd to put such big meaning on one little word. But that's all it takes, just 4 tiny symbols to express how I feel. It's really that simple. That's all I need, just 4 itty letters. I promise you no longer word could do better. Write a whole sentence, a paragraph, a novel. My 4-letter word is much more colossal. It traces every hair, skin, and blood cell. Just 4 teensy letters are you in a nutshell. This puny word is you as a whole. It embodies your mind, body, and soul. It describes you in such a way I proclaim that you sign these 4 letters in place of your name. You've probably guessed this word, I bet. But if you haven't figured it out just yet, I'll spell it out. I'll spell it out for the whole world to read. These 4 little letters are C-U-N-T. I was mad that that got me, but at the end of the day, that got me. Commitment reads, I don't want a boyfriend, I just want a guy to hang and grab food with almost every day and cuddle with me at night who I can introduce to my parents and also doesn't talk to other girls in any romantic capacity, and maybe in the future if it's something we both want and mutually decide is financial and personally right for us, buy a home and start a family. Nothing serious, I'm chill like that. Same thing, it's a bit millennial, it's a bit silly, it's very frustrating to read in a poetry collection, but I do kind of relate to it, and I do think that it's kind of funny. I'm sorry. And then Desirable reads, I've never been the one that got away, but I have been the one someone escaped from a time or two. Again, I think that these are funny. I think that they're good lines. It's just frustrating to read them presented as poetry. The song lyrics in here are also back. She continues to use poetry as song lyrics and song lyrics as poetry. The titular poem in here, Dandelion, reads, When I was a little girl, my mama said to me, What's your favorite flower, darling? I'll get you the seed. I said, Dandelion, dandelion, that one's so pretty. She said, Child, that one's not a flower, that one's just a weed. I still loved those mellow yellow petals anyway. What's the thing they say about a rose by any other name? Then my fragile flower turned into a ball of gray, so I took a breath and made a wish and blew them all away. Ironically, she also has a song called Dandelion, where the first 2 stanzas are the first verse and the second 2 stanzas are the second verse. I'm just not 100% sure how I feel about this. I mean, I would be lying if I said that I haven't done the same thing in like my personal writing, like turning poetry into songs and songs into poems. So I don't want to be like a hypocrite and say that these aren't particularly successful, but I think that there's a difference of interchanging the two in your personal life and in your published works. I don't particularly know how I feel about this, especially because there's a poem in here called Jealousy, which reads, I wonder if you wonder who doesn't have to wonder what it's like to be with me. And this is very, very similar to a line in her song called Hang Ups, which reads, Do you ever wonder if he has to wonder what it's like to be with me? And in that situation, I feel like these are slightly different enough. And I think that I feel that way because the song Hang Ups, and this is going to be a little bit embarrassing to admit on the internet, but I fucking love Hang Ups. This is kind of a side note, but I feel like Gabbie Hanna's music lives in 3 different areas for me. Songs that I simply don't like, songs that I enjoy, but I would never recommend them to somebody who isn't a Gabbie Hanna fan, and then songs that I think are fantastic and even non-Gabbie Hanna fans would like them. And Hang Ups is at like the very top of that category. So in a way, this was kind of fun to see this here, kind of like a worse version of that lyric. But at the same time, this is already a line that I know as a Gabbie Hanna fan. And really, at the end of the day, this book is made for Gabbie Hanna fans. Like, shocker. Guys, breaking news. Sally Rooney books are made for Sally Rooney fans. Alright, and then I once again tallied up the good, unfinished, and filler poems, but before I get into those, I want to read you the last poem, since I read the first and last poem from Adultolescence. The last poem in here is called Tragedy, and it reads, I'm too happy. I survive on melancholy the way a coroner depends on death, singing songs of sorrow as distraction from disaster, erecting shrines in honor of things that destroyed me, bottling my bad blood and drowning myself with it. I don't know how to write about anything but pain, but I have no pain. I'm too happy. Even in chaos, I'm happy. My brain feels different. I've come to the conclusion that everything will, in fact, be okay. I've survived monsoons and earthquakes and tornadoes in my mind, landslides and avalanches and hurricanes in my heart. And I deserve this. I deserve to be happy, but I'm too happy. Uninspiring happy. Problematic happy. I'm home, but I'm my best when I'm lost. I'm safe on shore, but I miss the turbulence. I'm longing for someone to rock the boat, but please don't, not yet. Let me feel safe for a while, but just for a while. Don't let me get too comfortable, but give me a moment. Give me this vacation. I've worked long enough. Let me be too happy just for a bit. While I personally don't love that poem, I think that it shows, once again, that there's just a lot more thought that went into this. There's a poem that ends this collection with a thematically relevant poem rather than Adultolescence, which ended with, did you give this copy to a friend? You better not have. Make them buy their own copy. But I do think that it ties up the collection in a really nice way, especially because I don't know why I didn't write a note about this, but something that she does improve upon in this collection is writing a more diverse set of poems. There are poems in here about healing and about happiness, and I feel like that's really what separates this from Adultolescence. And so it makes sense to start off with a poem basically saying, I've been so depressed and I finally found happiness, going into these poems about her pain and about her joy, and then ending it with, I'm too happy, but I love this feeling and I want it to last a little bit longer. I feel like that is much more cohesive and much more interesting, has much more of a vision than anything in Adultolescence. However, once again, the poems themselves are just not immensely high quality. I'm gonna compare the good, filler, and unfinished poems with the numbers from Adultolescence, and I also broke them down into percentages since this wasn't a perfect system. Again, I didn't label every poem, and the total numbers at the end ended up being different. So just for a reminder, Adultolescence had 22 poems that I marked as good, which was about 24% of the book. 22 poems that I marked as unfinished, again 24%, and then 48 poems that I marked as filler, which was 52% of the collection. Dandelion, on the other hand, had 23 books that I marked as good, which was 34%, 14 books that I marked as unfinished, which was 20%, and 30 poems that I wrote down as filler, so 44%. So you can tell based on these numbers from an admittedly flawed system, but Dandelion did improve. However, not very drastically. So without further ado, let me read you some highlights from each category and then I'll get into the epilogues. Starting off with filler, we have Buzz, which reads, one time I watched a fly fall and learned no one's perfect after all. Jesus Christ, like, oh my god, I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say because this is just so frustrating and I feel like I've hammered it in so many times that this is so frustrating. This one is especially horrible. It's called Gross and it reads, tear-stained cheeks and drear-stained peaks and fear-stained weeks and weir-stained freaks. What the fuck does that mean? This poem is called Dogs, and it's formatted in a circle, which is fun and interesting, and then you read the actual poem, which is running in circles, who's chasing who, and that's it. Endless reads, thank you for the thank you card. And no drawing or anything on this page, by the way. Blank poem. I feel like these filler poems are almost worse than the ones in Adultolescence, because Negotiation reads, what if meeting in the middle is holding us back? I can't do this anymore.
Like, I'm so fucking exhausted.
Disobedience reads, I would have loved you as long as you let me. I'll continue to love you without your permission. Literally just nothing. That's nothing. Platonic reads, your friendship feels like rejection. This is another double whammy. Space reads, you were never mine, so never mind, love. And Stalker reads, I tried to follow my dreams, but they got a restraining order. Holiday reads, met you at Halloween, liked you by Thanksgiving, loved you by Christmas, missed you by New Year's. I guess technically that tells a story in an insanely basic, forgettable, frustrating way, that has absolutely no details or emotions, but it does tell a story. And then the last one that I have for you is called Hope, and it reads, "Someday, somehow, somewhere, someone might somewhat care." Now, let's get into the unfinished poems. Welcome reads, "Every time the doorbell rings, I secretly hope that it's you, forcing me to listen, refusing to be ignored. Yesterday, a package delivery. Today, the pool guy. Tomorrow, you, I hope." I mean, I don't really have anything to say about that. I put it in the unfinished category for a reason. The last one that I have for you is called Recognize, and it reads, "A dream where someone you know is in it, but it doesn't look like them, yet you know it's them because of the way they make you feel. Our emotions are stronger than we give them credit for," which, once again, is just a horrible end to this poem that has a good idea behind it. I find the concept of the people in your dreams not looking like what they should, yet you know that it's them. I find that concept to be incredibly interesting. If you're writing about that, I am 100% automatically hooked, and this goes nowhere. This is so frustrating, and it's upsetting because there's so much to go into, way more than our emotions are smarter than we give them credit for. All right, let's get into some good poems because I've been pretty mean, but once again, I do think that this is generally a better collection. So let me read you some highlights. "I wish you were dead, not because I hate you, but because I love you so much. It's too hard knowing that you're walking around all breathy and pulsy and not decomposy, and I can't have you. I want your outsides to match my insides. I want them to be all still and rotting and soon to be forgotten." That's a little emo after reading it out loud. "I want to know that the reason you're not calling is your fingers have turned to dust. I fantasize that the reason you don't think about me is the worms have eaten your memory. It's much kinder to say I can't have your heart because it no longer beats. Let me down gently, just die already." It's a decent enough poem to where I'm willing to forgive the comedy, especially because I heavily relate to the sentiment. There's this poem called Two that I'm not going to read the entirety of. I just love this formatting. I love the drawing up here. I love how simplistic it is. And then I love how long the poem is. It really is a good poem, and once again, it made me wish that she did a little bit more prose. Okay, this is another example of the black pages. This poem is called Checkmate, and I love this design. I think that it is so cool. The poem itself is kind of whatever, but I'm still going to read it to you anyway. It reads, "I'd have bought you a chessboard for Christmas. Yours was missing some pieces, but you always wanted to play." And the L in that always is missing, which I just think is kind of fun. "I'd have your last name engraved in the side of the case and played with you all Christmas Day. I'd have tried my best to master chess because it'd be nice to share your time. I'd have tried my best to master chess because it'd be nice to win sometimes. I'd have learned how to move based on what you would do and know to think ahead. I'd have learned that the queen needs the most protecting and to kill off a knight instead. More pieces would get lost, you'd get bored, and you'd toss it away. That's how you'd repay me. I'd have bought you a chessboard for Christmas and told you this gift is the best thing you ever gave me." Again, I don't think that the poem is anything special, but I think it's good, and I think that the formatting is a lot of fun. I've critiqued the formatting disguising bad poems, but when the formatting is highlighting good poems, that's when I feel like it really excels and it's really exciting. I just showed you a completely unrelated page. I'm sorry. This next one I once again found really funny. It reads, "Ha, baby, you're so cute when you do that thing where you take such a big bite of food that your jaw pops when you try to chew. And by chew, I mean chomp your food so loud that it sounds like two horses making out, with mouths full of spaghetti and maggots. It's so adorable that I want to remove every single one of your teeth and put them into a blender until they're just a fine white powder that I can mix with almond milk and make you suck down silently through a straw and ingest it without making that super endearing, painfully precious, mind-numbingly lovable sloshing sound." This is the drawing attached to it. Again, I love when she uses black space. I love when the drawing actually heightens the poem. And I think that this poem is funny and is telling a story and is doing so through poetic tactics. I think it's extremely fun. Another poem that I just related to is called Sweetheart, and it reads, 15 to 18, or somewhere between, is the only love I ever felt. But I was young and erratic, and I'm overdramatic, so I'm not sure I trust myself. Which, again, I just related to, and I was like, this is an example of a short poem that does what it needs to do and does it successfully and doesn't overstay its welcome, but it still gets its point across. This is what I wish all of the short poems in this collection were like. And then this is maybe my favorite poem in the collection. Reading it back, I'm not sure that it is, but I wrote it down in my notes as maybe my fave. So it's called 1.1.20, and it reads, late afternoon, your head on my lap. Let's watch a movie means let's take a nap. Short-lived attempt till your willpower wanes. The TV plays, but I'm watching your face. No thriller could thrill me the way that you do. No horror could scare me like losing you. No comedy could make me laugh like your jokes. No rom-com could fill my heart up with hope, like the rise and fall of your chest as you dream, were my favorite movie, it seems. I hope I don't wake you as I play with your beard. You tell me it's fine with a snore in my ear. The diamond on my neck that you put there, thank you, my love, for the happy new year. I don't know, I would low-key say that, like, this one is my favorite poem in the collection after reading that out loud. I don't know if I really have a true favorite, though. I think that I mentioned that I had one in Adultolescence, but honestly, not a ton of these stood out to me in the way that I hoped they would. Which leads me into my general thoughts. I feel like this was just still rough. It is an improvement, but not as large as an improvement as I would have liked to see. There are a lot of issues in Adultolescence that do get resolved in here, but there are just as many issues that do not get resolved, and that makes it a continually frustrating read. I can defend Adultolescence to a certain extent because it's her debut poetry collection. I can't defend Dandelion to the same extent because Adultolescence had so much controversy and she knew that she rushed herself and it wasn't a super great collection. And I want to commend her for improving, but it also gets to a point where if you're repeating the same mistakes over and over again, how many times can I forgive you? How many books can I forgive you for? So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the epilogues in all of these books. I'm going to talk about them from worst to best. The worst one in here, in my opinion, is the Doodles and Drawings, which is the Target exclusive version. This one, to me, doesn't feel like an epilogue, and to be fair, I've been calling them epilogues. That's not what they've been advertised as. This has been advertised as exclusive material, and I'm assuming that when she was advertising these, she would have been advertising them as like exclusive bonus content, and that is really true when it comes to the Target edition. This just feels like bonus content to me. The first thing reads, before I wrote music, I wrote poetry. Poems became lyrics, stanzas became verses. Nothing feels better than setting my poetry to a melody. Please enjoy these unreleased lyrics from some songs born directly from or inspired by a poem and some other fun stuff. It's really interesting to look back at these because most of these have been released. Stoneheart has been released. The next one is Anti-Social Media, which I don't know if y'all remember. Let me just read you this line and see if it sparks a memory for you. I climbed out of my head and I watched myself implode. A thought without a body ought to be a shot to take a load off my brain as poison, and I'm searching for the antidote. But every time I find it, my defenses scream, oh no you don't.
Whoa.
Ooh, I can't believe that she included that in here, especially because I think that this came out after the controversy of this song. The next song in here is Satellite, which I think is very interesting that she included because Satellite was her second song that she ever released, and then she ended up removing it because she didn't feel like it fit in with her as an artist. So it's interesting that she's including the lyrics to it because I'm pretty sure they're identical to the version that came out in 2017. This is my favorite part in this section. She says that she got all of her siblings to draw their favorite animals eating their favorite food, and Gabbie was going to trace them and turn them into new drawings in her book. And this is the result of that. I just think that it's really, really adorable, and all of the siblings have their names signed under the drawing. I think that this is very cute. Again, it feels more like bonus content, but I do think that this was advertised as bonus content, not an epilogue, so I'm not mad about it. There is another poem in here that reads, "You remind me of my dad, and I don't mean that in the good way, because the truth is that there isn't that much good there in the first place, but there's something deep inside the recesses of my mind that makes me want to make you love me when you make me want to die. It's kind of sad because I've been acting like my mom." There are some filler drawings in here, but you know, it's bonus content. I can't be too mad. There's a few more songs, and then that's the end. So I think that it's fun. I think that it's cute. I think that as a Gabbie Hanna fan, used loosely, I don't consider myself a fan of her anymore, but as somebody who was, I think I would have found this content to be fun and good to have. Next is the Letters to Strangers epilogue, which was the Barnes and Noble exclusive. Do you guys love that I just know that off the top of my head? This was decent. It made me wish that she did more prose. There's a letter to the guy who missed the bus, which I found to be really emotional. There's a letter to this little kid at the grocery store that I found to be really good. She has a letter to the first man who broke my heart, which details an experience that she had when she went to downtown Pittsburgh with her family when she was a child. And she saw a homeless man and she said, "Mommy, can we give them some change?" And her mom said, "No, if we give them money, they're just going to use it for drugs." She writes, "That's when I saw your beautiful crystal blue eyes buried in a forest of dirt and facial hair. You had heard her, the way you'd heard so many others for so many years. I saw the shame and embarrassment on your face, the hunger in your body language. You held my stare for a moment as your eyes welled, turning away the fraction of a second before they spilled over, but not before I saw the quivering corners of your lips turn into a full grimace. I wish so often that I could somehow find you and tell you what I wanted to tell you that night, that I'm sorry, that I don't think you'd spend the money on drugs, and if you did, then that's none of my business. Giving to those in need on the contingency that they spend it in the way you want them to isn't generous, it's controlling. I really hope you found a way. You've shown me mine," which, ooh, that's a rough last line. I don't love that. I don't love that last line. But I think that it's oh my gosh, and it's fucking signed "Sincerely a Millennial." When I read this, I was like, this is really emotional, and then I remember being frustrated by the end. And I still feel that way. I still think that it's a good letter, it just, the landing isn't there. There's also one that she wrote to her younger sibling who didn't make it in childbirth, and that one is also very emotional. There are some pretty good ones in here. This is the longest epilogue out of the bunch, and it ranges from really insightful to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess empty is the word that I'm looking for. They range from pretty good to pretty empty. It's varied, and so that's why I like it, but I don't love it and was slightly disappointed by it. And then my favorite one, which is just the standard version of Dandelion, is Stories I Have to Get Drunk to Tell, which is basically a personal essay collection. This is easily the strongest thing that I have ever seen Gabbie Hanna write. I really, really like this essay collection. I think it's pretty good. It once again just made me wish that she did more prose, and I think that if she started her book journey with a memoir of some sort or a short story collection, it would have been a lot better received than her poetry was. She talks about a lot of her childhood, which was very difficult and traumatic for her. She talks about a lot of dark stuff. She talks about her eating disorders. She talks about abusive relationships that she was in. She talks about her experience with SA. There's also some really interesting reflections on fame in these stories. There are some really incredibly well-written short stories in here. You can absolutely nitpick if you want to, and I did. But like, even as I was writing them down, I felt like they weren't particularly relevant to mention because I feel like pointing them out would overshadow really how good those stories are. So I wouldn't particularly say like, oh, you need to buy Dandelion because you need to read the story collection. It's not really a short story collection. It's really an essay collection. The entire bonus section ranges like 22 pages. But those 22 pages are some of the best writing that I have seen from Gabbie Hanna. So I don't particularly have a conclusion. The point of this video was to revisit her poetry, see if it's really as bad as people made it up to be, and kind of revisit them separated from a Gabbie Hanna fan perspective. Because that truly is the last time that I've read these books, is when I still considered myself to be a fan of hers. And the conclusion that I came to is that they are pretty rough, but they're not entirely god-awful garbage. There's talent in here, there's creativity in here. I think that Gabbie Hanna has a lot to say, and when she knows how to get her point across, it comes across really successfully. But that doesn't stop her from reverting back to some of her more comedic nature and kind of honing it in on a lot of the poems in both collections. Dandelion certainly is better, but again, not by much, and Adultolescence is, once again, pretty rough. But I had a lot of fun revisiting these collections, no matter what I thought of them at the end of the day. Again, do I think that they're worth going out and reading? No, but I had a good time reading them, and I hope that you guys had a really good time hearing about them. Anyways, that's all that I have for you guys today. Make sure you do all of the YouTube shit, like, comment, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you sooner than a month from now, but we'll see. Bye, Divas.